There are moments after certain conversations when the world does not immediately look different, and yet something in you knows it is. Not because new information was learned, but because attention itself has shifted. And once that happens, you begin to realize how much of life was always speaking quietly beneath the surface, waiting for someone to slow down enough to notice. Since that evening, I've been thinking about what changes when we begin to see differently. Not only what we notice, but what that noticing asks of us. Because once you begin to recognize the unseen layers carried inside people and places, you don't fully return to innocence again. I'm Marcel, and this is where we learn to see differently. After certain encounters, places stop feeling entirely ordinary. Roads become layered. Buildings become layered. Even silence becomes layered. You begin to understand that every place carries more than its visible surface. Histories, absences, lives that shaped what exists now, even when those lives were not fully recorded. And sometimes what changes most is not what you discover, but your relationship to what you were already passing every day without seeing. I think that is what stayed with me most. Not the stories themselves, but how close they were all along. A supermarket aisle, a road name, a remembered car, dust in Beaufort West, fragments that on their own might have remained ordinary forever, and yet together they began to speak to each other. There's also something unsettling about this kind of seeing, because once attention deepens, simplicity disappears. Places stop being neutral. Stories stop being singular. And people stop fitting neatly into categories of ordinary or important. You begin to realize how many lives moved alongside history without ever imagining themselves to be part of it. And perhaps that is true for most people. I think about my dad differently now, not because he changed, but because I hear his stories differently. What once sounded like simple childhood memories now carries another layer altogether. Not fame, not significance in the way the world usually measures it, but proximity to unfolding history before anyone knew what it would become. There's another layer to this that I've only begun to fully understand recently. And maybe it explains why stories have always mattered to me. My dad was a storyteller of note, not only at home, but in the classroom too. He taught history, geography, and Afrikaans. But facts were never just facts in his hands. He brought worlds to life. He had a love for language itself, for big words like oration and soliloquies, for alliteration and wordplay, for music inside sentences. He didn't just speak about things, he shaped them as he spoke. He loved speaking about the Karoo, not only as landscape, but as deep time itself. He would describe it as the burial ground of the dinosaurs, taking us back to a time when the Karoo Basin was still an inland lake and prehistoric creatures moved freely across what now feels dry and still. And listening to him, history never felt distant. Time felt alive, layered, reachable through imagination. Every year, my sister and I would receive gift packs of books, and we would wait with excitement to open those fresh pages where characters seemed to rise out of the paper and begin living around us. And perhaps that is where all of this began, not only in history itself, but in being taught to enter stories fully enough that they stopped feeling separate from life. There's irony in it too, that years later, in a roundabout way, I would find myself working in museum collections as a collections assistant in the Karoo Paleontology collection, surrounded again by traces of ancient worlds, fragments, evidence, remains carrying stories across impossible stretches of time. And looking back now, it feels less accidental than I once thought, as though the instinct to preserve, notice, and interpret stories had already been forming quietly long before I had a language for it. And standing with all of this now, the spa encounter, the road that carried centuries of insistence, the memory of my dad, and the deep time of the Karoo, something settles more quietly than it speaks. That lives are not separate from history. They are simply not recognized yet. And most stories are not lost. They're just waiting for the moment someone slows down enough to hear them differently. Not to extract them, not to shape them, but to allow them to surface in their own time. Because maybe stories aren't something people tell. Maybe they are something that already exists, waiting for the moment we are finally still enough to notice them. And what I understand now is this: that seeing differently does not make life louder, it makes it deeper. And once you see in layers, you begin to live in them too. I'm Marcel, and this is where we learn to see differently.